This is going to be a long, difficult and depressing video, so strap in. Let me start off by reading something that you may recognize. Please, we ask that before you make any rash assumptions, leave any post or go on a crusade through the comment section, you listen to this video in its entirety for the full context. I know it's long, but it's only out of necessity. With Games Workshop's new explicitly zero tolerance policy against fan animations, we no longer feel it's tenable to produce Warhammer fan works at this time. If you didn't already know, these were the words of Bruva Alphabusa almost exactly 3 years ago when he announced an indefinite hiatus of their show if the Emperor had a text-to-speech device, at least until Games Workshop becomes explicitly more amenable towards fan projects. He continues, "We cannot see a future under the sword of Damocles, under rickety laws that are constantly attacked by copyright lobbyists under two companies, both Games Workshop and YouTube, that would take action against the channel, even if it has no legal ground." When I first heard this 3 years ago, I thought that perhaps it was an overreaction. Surely there was no way Games Workshop would or could go after such a blatantly comedic parody show like TTS. That would be madness. Many seem to think the same thing, and TTS got a lot of flack from the community for the preliminary decision to call it quits. But TTS was right. In fact, it turned out that Alphabusa's statement was prophetic. Things have not gotten better. Despite fans desperately begging Games Workshop to embrace fanworks, they have instead doubled down and continued the persecution of Warhammer's most loyal fans. Over the past few months, we've seen Games Workshop go down a path of legal persecution against fans previously thought unimaginable. I have covered and shown proof of this on my channel in various videos. They've issued copyright takedowns against completely unmonetized fan animations. And as if to explicitly validate Alphabusa's decision to quit Warhammer, they've even issued copyright strikes against parody. I've seen at least 4 different digital protection agencies operating on Games Workshop's behalf, seemingly using mindless AI algorithms to scrape the web and issue often baseless takedowns against creators and sellers. In a massively questionable lawsuit, they struck a total of 280 people at once. Some of these were valid targets, but many among them are completely innocent, and they are suffering serious financial repercussions all the same. Although I have not yet covered this publicly yet, the Warhammer cosplay community is now under attack as well. Many cosplay commissioners have been sent cease and desists, and there is probably more that we don't even know about. To this very day, they continue maliciously claiming trademarks that can't possibly be enforced. But that doesn't matter, because it's basically impossible to fight a legal battle against a corporation of this size. TTS deciding to quit may have been ahead of the curve by a few years, but if this hasn't convinced you that Alphabusa made the right decision, then I don't know what will. When you listen to his announcement, you can hear the raw emotion as he explains why the show can no longer go on. Providing for his family and his newborn son is the priority. The very real threat of getting sued by an immoral and ruthless company like Games Workshop, and the financial repercussions that this might have for his family, was not something that he was willing to risk. This year I've become a father myself with the arrival of my firstborn daughter. Listening to his message, I can now relate so much more than I did 3 years ago. I've never been the type of person that easily bends the knee, and those who have followed my work for a while know that I always called Games Workshop out for their bullshit, even if that meant painting a target on my own back. Many of you have been boycotting their products and voting with your wallets. I'm really proud of all of you who have stood by their principle and did what could and needed to be done to push back against Games Workshop's insatiable greed. We hoped that by hitting their bottom lines, they would realize they needed defense. We hoped it would stop the company from going down this destructive path. These people who stood up for their fandom, I consider to be the true fans of Warhammer. But our efforts were not enough. I have come to the conclusion that we have lost this war. I will try my best to explain why. I ask you to listen to this whole video in its entire context. It is my intent that this is the last video I will be making on this topic. Because after this, I've said what needs to be said and want to move on. I will use this as an opportunity to get things off my chest. It will be quite lengthy, but I'm sure you will want to hear all of it. As you know from previous videos on this topic, I've always tried to provide sufficient proof and documentation to support my claims. I hope that by doing this, I've been able to establish myself as trustworthy. Once I started to expose what Games Workshop was doing, various people have been contacting me with more information. This mostly involves people who've had their content, monetization or shops removed, but also people who work with Games Workshop directly. Much of this information was easily verifiable through screenshots. Some of it was not, because the source was either unwilling or unable to provide sufficient proof. This could be for various reasons, most commonly because they fear repercussions of going public with this information. I've never shared anything without their express permission, but given Games Workshop's litigious reputation, I tend to take these people at their word. Until now, I've decided that I would only cover things for which I had irrefutable proof. For example, I've been in contact with various people making cosplay who received cease and desists. I know this is true, but because the documentation I can share is limited, I have decided not to cover it yet. I knew that with anything less than undeniable proof, the corporate bootlickers would try anything to discredit me, or even go as far as attempting to smear my reputation. And so I made sure that any claim I made public was ironclad before putting it out there. The opinion of people calling me a grifter means absolutely nothing to me anymore. Anyone knows that Games Workshop's litigious track record speaks for itself at this point. If they did not intend any of this, they should publicly set things right. Until then, they do not deserve the benefit of the doubt. I was 13 when I got my first sniff of 40k and purchased a 5th edition Black Temper Codex at my local Games Workshop, along with a tactical squad. I've recently just turned 30 and can look back on 17 years of fascination with this franchise. For me, the hobby grew from painting miniatures, to making fan art, to doing a full-time YouTube channel making animations. Over the past 3 years though, the things I loved about Warhammer have been destroyed for me through death by 1,000 cuts. At first I stopped caring about the tabletop. Then I stopped caring about the minis. And then I no longer cared about the video games, and finally I stopped caring about the lore as well. Some of the lore still has a special place in my heart, and continues to be a source of inspiration. I can't overstate how much impact the Siege of Frax has had on me, but if you're a fan of this channel, I'm sure you've noticed. But it no longer feels worth it. Whether it's been due to the insane retail prices, the attacks against fans, or the disregard for their own lore, I'm sure one way or another it has been the same for many of you as well. At this point, I just simply don't care about anything Games Workshop releases anymore. I'm making this video for people like you, people who have been betrayed by the very thing that gave them so much joy and community over the years. The type of people that deeply feel the painful decisions of creators like Alphabusa and me to leave this broken franchise behind. I've previously expressed that I think what is happening now is actually way worse than what was happening during the release of Warhammer Plus. The implications of the latest events signal catastrophic consequences for the fan community. I was always under the impression that as long as you remained unmonetized or made parody, you would be safe. Surely there was some kind of legal formula, like following their IP policies, one could stick to keep their channel safe. The recent events have completely shattered this naive belief. It is now my opinion that nobody is safe from them. This is not an admission of guilt. It is the recognition that there is a rabid shark in the water biting everyone. And no matter if it's your favorite swimming pool or if you did nothing wrong, it's simply time to get out of the water. Games Workshop deliberately operates as opaque as possible. They always try to settle out of court so that no legal precedent can be used against them. They really do not want people to have any certainty about what is or is not allowed. This uncertainty will be the death of creativity within the hobby. It is no coincidence that when they updated their fan art policies years ago, they literally removed a wealth of creativity and celebrating the hobby. That's precisely what they intended. I recently realized that by exposing Games Workshop and spreading this information to as many people as possible, I actually played right into their plan. They want creators to self-censor their content out of fear, or even better, just stop making Warhammer content completely. By warning people of the dangers of making Warhammer content, unfortunately, I did the dirty work for them, but I still think that it was the right thing to do. Games Workshop would continue on this warpath, whether people knew it or not. I believe it's better that people are now aware of what is going on, rather than wake up one day only to see their entire channel removed due to random copyright strikes. At least now creators can make their own informed decision whether to continue making Warhammer content or to stop, rather than Games Workshop legal team making that decision for them through legal procedures. On Alphabusa's Patreon, you will even be able to find an announcement where, in the light of recent events, they are considering deleting all their old TTS videos to protect their channel. They stopped making Warhammer content 3 years ago, but because of this they are still stressed about the potential threat of Games Workshop coming after them. That's the effect all of this has on creators. A sentiment you will often find on this topic is that people don't understand why Games Workshop would deliberately destroy free advertising made by fans. Let me tell you this. They simply don't have any use for us old fans. In fact, they believe we are detrimental to Warhammer's success. Let me repeat that. They believe we are detrimental to Warhammer's success. The old fans are too difficult to please. We know why the new lore they're pumping out sucks. We complain whether products are subpar. We know where to get our paints and models when the Games Workshop products are either too expensive or out of stock. We have a community that can largely enjoy Warhammer without ever having to deal with Games Workshop, and this is simply bad for business. The goal of corporations is always to have their stock price go up. This is why they will just never be satisfied with the current fans, no matter what. They will always chase the market, and when they think that they no longer need the old fans, they will leave them behind. And because they have no respect for their own setting, they will change and corrupt the established lore for this purpose. If you're new to Warhammer, you might not experience this right now, but in a few years, you will start to understand what I'm talking about, and eventually, the same will happen to you. They are sanitizing Warhammer to make it more palatable to a new and wider audience, who they hope will be drawn in by their new show in collaboration with Amazon. Obviously, videos about the Demon Collaba do not fit in that vision. The same goes for anything else that modern day Games Workshop does not approve of, and like Alphabusa said, that most certainly includes TTS as well. Games Workshop knows that they have one shot at mainstream adoption by working with Amazon. It will be the big catalyst for Games Workshop to transition from a tabletop company to a licensing company. They know that 3D printing is increasingly taking chunks out of their tabletop market. Through licensing their IP to games and films, they can make loads of easy money while other people do the work for them. They've already seen the success of Warhammer Total War and Space Marine, but from their perspective, it is difficult to justify selling their license for an insane amount of money to parties like Amazon while fans are allowed to use it for free. Everybody knows what happened when fans of The Lord of the Rings called out the Rings of Power show for its blatant disrespect of the lore. The most expensive TV show in the world turned into the most expensive flop. If this happens to Warhammer, it is game over for them. It would be way better if all the old fans are removed from the equation. Basically, if you got into Warhammer before the introduction of Primaris Marines, you will not be missed. I know that other big Warhammer lore channels have watched my videos on this topic, but most of them have remained silent. Of course, I understand that they don't want to paint a target on their backs and prefer to keep operating under the radar, but given the direction Warhammer is going, that seems like a fool's hope to me. After all, basically all lore channels use excessive amounts of official artwork that could be seen as infringement. And so I wondered why they didn't speak up, since it seems likely that they too would eventually also be affected by this one way or another. The reason why was revealed to me when I was contacted by someone working closely with Games Workshop. The reason they reached out to me was because they agreed with the sentiment of my videos that what is happening right now is extremely detrimental to the community. Unfortunately, this time I won't be able to show you nearly the same amount of tangible proof to validate what I'm about to share. The reason for that is that this person is under a legal non-disclosure agreement, and everything was disclosed to me in a private voice call. Telling you who this person is would be a breach of trust and friendship and have severe consequences for them. We had quite a long conversation which provided definitive answers and confirmed the theories I had about the direction Games Workshop is planning to go. There was however one thing that caught me by complete surprise, which should have been obvious in hindsight. I was already aware that some miniature painting channels had signed contracts with Games Workshop to receive pre-release miniatures. This kind of agreement seems fairly straightforward for a miniature company. However, what I had never realized was that in the past few years, several of the large Warhammer lore channels also signed partnership contracts with Games Workshop. Of course, they had to sign their infamous non-disclosure agreement, so they are not even allowed to talk about this partnership at all. Part of the terms of contract include not doing anything to hurt the goodwill and reputation of Games Workshop. These lore channels sometimes receive pre-release lore and books so that they can cover them in videos and make those public alongside the new release. I was told, however, that this doesn't really amount to much, as the stuff they receive isn't even guaranteed to cover every release. To me personally, this hardly seems worthwhile, as there is so much lore to cover already that this type of deal seems pretty much negligible to a channel's success. The real benefit of the partnership program is of course that it essentially comes with a guarantee that Games Workshop will not legally come after their channel. That is of course as long as they don't criticize or badmouth them. After this revelation, a lot of things suddenly started making more sense to me. Although I know who they are, I will not name these creators, as I am not here to call anyone out in particular, but they are basically the big channels that you've probably watched dozens of videos from. I'm sure you will be able to make an educated guess as to who they are. This is why you will not see these channels call out Games Workshop in any serious way. These creators are making a lot of money through Patreon and YouTube, and are not willing to risk that. And you know what? Good for them. It must be nice to know that your channel is safe from all of this legal bullshit. But by signing with Games Workshop, they have doomed the rest of the fanbase. These large, influential channels that are considered pillars of the community are incentivized to keep their mouths shut. and will continue creating a steady flow of curated fan content. Games Workshop knows there won't be any backlash from them, which allows them to pretty much get away with anything they want. I would not go as far as to say that these creators deliberately sold us out. They were offered contracts during a time when it seemed that Games Workshop would tolerate fan works. They had not gone after any animators in a couple of years. That was until a few months ago, when Games Workshop resumed their attack against the fanbase. So even these creators got suckered into it like pawns on a chessboard. And because of this, those who have not signed a deal with Games Workshop are now shit out of luck. I was also informed that during recent years, Games Workshop have started to infiltrate the fanbase. They now have people keeping a close eye on YouTube channels and even Discord servers. If they see a creator doing stuff they don't like, they will try to go after them one way or another. For example, if they share 3D printable models in a Discord server, Games Workshop would consider striking at their YouTube channel as punishment. And that is why these strikes often lack context and don't make much sense at all from an outside perspective. These DMCA takedowns are deliberately vague, so that they are hard to challenge. If you don't know the specific reasons for the takedowns, it could mean anything. And if you don't know what you did wrong, you get the uneasy feeling that you could be targeted again at any time. This is a very effective method of dissuading creators from making any future Warhammer content at all. The boycott of Warhammer Plus was a defeat for Games Workshop. I always hoped that they had learned their lesson and come to understand the value of fan content. Ironically, it turns out that they have indeed learned that lesson, but in the quintessential corporate Games Workshop way, they came to the conclusion that they needed to apply even more control over the fans instead. Instead of amending their ways, they have doubled down, and now they are 2 steps ahead of us. That's why I'm saying that this war has been lost. An apt comparison to an event from the lore would be Isstvan 3. There are those who are influenced by the warrior lodges and are going to side with the corrupted War Master no matter what, while those who stand by their principles are considered too troublesome and behind their backs are sentenced to die by virus bombing. Like the loyalist on Isstvan 3 asked, did we hurt them? Yes, they did, but they are still going to be destroyed. The result of all of this is that over time, the Warhammer community will be chipped away. Copyright takedowns, cease and desists, and lawsuits will be the name of the game for the years to come. They will pick us up one by one until only officially sanctioned Warhammer content remains. 3 years ago, Games Workshop fired their first warning shots, and this is exactly what they were planning to do. Against better judgment, I decided to return to making Warhammer content because to me and many others, it seemed that they were no longer interested in going after the fans. But as it turned out, they were planning to double down all along. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That is why a few weeks ago I decided that I would need to stop making Warhammer content altogether. For years, I had been engrossed by Warhammer on a daily basis. This decision to stop was not made lightly. I've always had the strong urge to express myself creatively, and the thought of not being allowed to do so for the thing that I'm so passionate about is painful. I went through a stage of grief, and for a while, if I so much looked at the Warhammer logo, I actually got a sick feeling in my stomach. If I had made a video right then, it would definitely be filled with a lot more accusations and curse words. I think Alphabusa explained it best when he said it feels like a bad breakup. All of this probably leaves you with the question of what I'm planning to do with the channel. I'm going to keep making content, just not Warhammer. I'm going to wrap up the projects that I'm currently working on and then stop making Warhammer content altogether. I will finish the Siege of Frax lore series, because leaving that series unfinished now that we are so close to the finale would break my heart, and I'm sure many of yours as well. I'm also going to release my Siege of Frax cinematic fan animation, on which I've spent a disgusting amount of effort to get to the highest quality possible. I'm really proud of how it turned out, and it's almost finished anyway. I know a lot of you are interested in the Horus Heresy lore series. The script for the next video, which was about the burning of Prospero, was already as good as finished. But in light of recent events, and I'm sure to the disappointment of many, I no longer see continuing this series as a possibility. With my style of video, it would take years to finish the story to the end of the Siege of Terra. Laboring on such a massive project for years under this legal threat is simply untenable. And frankly, with Games Workshop blatantly disregarding their own lore, I no longer see the point. After this, I will be switching to something else completely. I think you can understand that while all of this was going on, for a while I was deeply demotivated to work on anything related to Warhammer. You've probably noticed the lack of lore content on my channel in the past few months. In the meantime, I've mostly been working on fan art for Space King. For those who don't know, Space King is a new setting from Flash Kids. While working on this, I felt carefree and energized in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. And it was then that I realized how draining all the uncertainty had been all these years. It will be a big relief when I can finally leave all of that behind me. Just know that despite these depressing events, there is room for optimism. The more Games Workshop tightens their grip, the more fans will slip between their fingers. I know a lot of people who are sick of their shit and are looking for another setting to enjoy, or are even trying to make their own stuff. I may even develop my own setting at some point. Right now I feel we are in a bit of a vacuum and it will take a while for communities to bloom around new and interesting stuff. I intend to use my channel to help introduce people to new franchises that are popping up. As my channel is reaching 200k subscribers, I'm starting to realize more and more that it's not the setting itself that makes it meaningful, but the community around it. I much rather have a tight-knit group of people who are really into what I'm doing than hundreds of thousands of subscribers who don't give a shit. If only Games Workshop had learned that lesson too, but it's too late for that. Transitioning away from Warhammer, especially as a content creator who has spent years catering to this audience and building up the channel, is very uncomfortable. But truth be told, you don't really need Warhammer to be successful. Just look at Alphabusa. They have more support in Patreon than ever before. And Space King is also doing fantastic. From my own experience, my non-Warhammer content has often gotten more interest than a lot of my Warhammer stuff. My firstborn daughter is now 4 months old, but still an absolute handful. This has prevented me from getting as much work done as I would like, which is very frustrating. In fact, I have to record this video with her on my lap. However, everything has a silver lining, and while taking care of her, I've been able to spend many hours listening to podcasts and thinking. While working so hard the past few years, my personal growth had taken a backseat, and it's been refreshing to have some time to reflect and formulate new plans for the future. Despite all the shit going on now and having to say farewell to Warhammer, I've been able to regain my optimism for the future. If you enjoy my content, I hope you will stick around for the new stuff that I will be making, and I promise you that I will put the same amount of energy and effort into anything I do. If you appreciate all that I've done for the community, please let me know in the comments below.